There are a number of security companies that have been engaged, private security companies that have been engaged to assist wealthy Americans who have not only residences in Mexico, but those that are also on vacation there, to get them out of the country safely and securely, bearing in mind that the commercial airlines flying into Mexico have been disrupted and they were entirely halted at one stage, but could be volatile in terms of their reliability to be able to evacuate people in a traditional sense. Depending on where the principal might be, and the principal I'm referring to, the client, will evidently have some bearing on how expensive that extraction can be. And having been involved in many extractions myself and affecting the removal particularly of people from conflict zones, it can be extremely expensive. It really fundamentally will come down to geographic location, whether that is in the heart of the CJNG territories, and whether there are conflicts which are currently taking place by the cartel down there, and whether there is a likelihood or potential likelihood of there being blockades or even unauthorized road stops. Now, as a private security contractor, they will want to go down there being prepared for alternate routes and options that they can consider in the event of any of those threats potentially presenting themselves. In terms of the cartel's current attacks and certainly their targeting, we know that they've been targeting many of the tourism areas, many of the areas that people would consider standard vacation, whether it be from the United Kingdom or from the United States or elsewhere around the world. And this is the most concerning aspect, because evidently, if you do particularly go to the more expensive resort areas, the security may be questionable around those resorts. Secondly, the occupants or the guests may be of high net worth, which obviously then adds into that dynamic the possibility of kidnap for ransom. However, certainly in terms of individuals that are located in some of those tourism resorts, it may or should be considered very carefully, and reference to the Foreign Commonwealth website that has travel advisory specific to Mexico. I would suggest, if one's planning a trip down there, to consult with the website and see exactly what the threat levels are like in the areas that they're looking to. But information has been sporadic, and there have been a number of influencers on social media stating that where they are located, it's absolutely fine. And this is again where the risk is presented, because it can give a false sense of security to individuals to believing that they can go down there and they'll be absolutely fine. But it's constantly changing. The CJNG may very well focus in on specific areas a little bit later, because again, in the capacity that they operate, they're not just simply a organized crime group. They are a quasi-political group as well. And some of these areas that they operate or control, they control on a number of different levels, almost in a political administrative role, providing the support in where there is minimal law enforcement, and even certainly in certain cases, philanthropy in terms of supplies of food and water to those that are in poverty. It does, to the external viewer, look like just chaos and just civil instability. But what we have to consider is the CJNG is a highly sophisticated cartel that doesn't simply operate on organized crime levels of trafficking, drug smuggling. Because they have this quasi-political structure, they are very much reliant on controlling areas where the current and existing government are weak, and enabling the government to remain in place to support infrastructure rather than necessarily carry out the local duties. And the way that the CJNG operates is to extort locals through taxes, which is primarily extortion, through to providing that support in the local area. And they have penetrated not only these territories, but extensively the infrastructure within these territories of the military and the police, which means that they are almost controlling those areas like a political party would. Law enforcement has always been questionable in terms of integrity in Mexico. There are some incredibly capable, good and honest branches, but there are many others who are suffering, again, extensive poverty and are then susceptible to recruitment, whether that be coercively or by force, to support the cartels. And the cartels have a war chest of in excess of $20 billion at their disposal, which they can distribute in various different ways. Now, the way CJNG also operates is on unquestionable loyalty within their ranks. Their hierarchy, they operate as a hub and spoke, and their hub, their centralized command and control, if you like, is based in Mexico, but their spoke operations extend globally. They not only take control of certain areas of Central America and Latin America, but also into Europe and into Asia. So this is a highly sophisticated group that is acting almost like a political party, but with this dark underbelly of organized crime. I think anybody who underestimates the reach of the CJNG would be foolish. And certainly in terms of the recent assassination of El Mencho, it is suspected, although not confirmed, that Tier 1 Delta Force operators were involved in that operation. Now, Donald Trump's position has been to categorize them as an FTO, or foreign terrorist organization, back in 2025. Now, that tag is not undifferent or indifferent to, say, Islamic State. And people talk about Islamic State as a terrorist organization. But we mustn't forget that they've been looking or seeking to create a caliphate, their own region, their own, if you like, environment of control under Sharia law. And this is very similar to what we're seeing with CJNG in terms of, albeit not Sharia law, they are trying to control those areas. So anybody that believes that the CJNG is not a force to be reckoned with is seriously underestimating them. But the way that they're doing this is very, very clever by ensuring that the existing government remains in place, but almost looks like a puppet government because they are doing the traditional job of a standard government, but with very little control. We may very well see more violence for a little while whilst CJNG are exerting their control. What we're going to specifically be looking out for, and when I say we, I'm talking us in the private security world, will be if there is a spike in kidnappings. Now, we appreciate the CJNG, they believing that the US had an integral part, when you know that the US had a part in the intelligence aspects of the attack on El Mencho recently, but whether it was tactically also involved with this deployment allegedly of Delta Force operators, what we will be looking at is a very strong message being sent to America about the control they have their side of the border in Mexico. And we may see a spike in kidnappings of Americans or targeting of American assets. And that's really where this will be the watching brief, certainly for the imminent period, to see whether this has some very significant impact in terms of targeting United States assets. CJNG will continue to survive. Anybody who believes that they won't is underestimating not only the strength of their organization, the financing that is behind it, but also the reach that they've got across the entire country and how they've embedded themselves into local communities that many of those local communities know no different and in some regards are reliant on the CJNG administering those local communities. So in terms of their strength, they will continue to be a formidable force. In terms of a counter-attack or a countermeasure by the United States against them, this could be incredibly difficult and extremely complex because it isn't just hitting, for example, a few drug factories or weapons factories. What we're talking about is an organization that works on the Weber's principles of political power through persuasion or intimidation. And we're looking at a group that will be there for many, many years. They're overtaking the Sinaloa cartels and the other cartels, not only in Mexico, but internationally. You can cut the head off the Hydra, but to be honest, the Hydra continues.